Exactly. I was thinking that too. That really gets straight to the reason why I wanted to talk about this film. After all this time, we've ignored emails, requests coming in to talk about it. I kind of just thought this would go away, but it still has a major following. And, this is something that happens way too often, and that is they are skeptical of religion.
Right.
They are willing to challenge claims about Christian origins, but they do it in a academically irresponsible way, and even pretty notable publications. National Geographic had that whole thing with the Gospel of Judas a couple of years ago, which they completely blew out of proportion.
And then who was it?
What you could imply?
The Jesus tomb. I know it was James Cameron.
The ossuary box.
Yeah, James Cameron was claiming that he found the box that has Jesus' remains and made a huge documentary. The whole thing was a forgery.
Meanwhile, he had already been working on Avatar for 10 years before, before the tomb was created.
Now that still exists, right?
Actually, not really.
The Pandora box.
Both travesties, but one with really good special effects.
That's right.
The thing is, when this happens, we give the Christian apologists all the ammunition they need.
Absolutely.
This really reinforces their caricature of skeptics, that they have to really reach and distort the facts to challenge Christian origins, which is not the case. There's a lot of good scholarship that really picks apart the biblical narrative's view of Jesus. But what's amazing is just how popular this...
it's huge.
Yeah, Peter Joseph and the Zeitgeist film, they have, as we mentioned, they have Z-Day coming up. This is on March 13th, so it's in just another week.
Which is close to the equinox. And as we know, the equinox, it is the date of Easter is assigned to the first.
They're planning their big event on March 13th, and at last year's Z-Day, they claimed that they had 450 events worldwide in 70 countries across the globe. They claimed that
50 million people have watched the movie.
Yeah.
And that was as of last year.
I'm not so sure I trust those numbers, partially because the YouTube count wasn't anywhere close to that.
No.
But we were talking in the hundreds of thousands, and that's impressive in and of itself. But 50 million, that was a far cry.
Right.
And also, I looked into some of their chapters around the globe that they say they have for the Z movement.
There's one in West Michigan, is there not?
There is, but it meets on the internet.
Ooh. Well, you know what? It's really tough to get people to come together on the internet to discuss conspiracy theories. So clearly someone's doing something right.
And that the Vatican City chapter, I'm a little skeptical about that.
We're not supposed to know about the Vatican City.
What are you doing, Cardinal? Oh, spreadsheets.
So we want to talk about what he actually says in this movie, because I'm fairly incensed by an awful lot of it.
All right, Peter Joseph, at the very end of the religion segment of Zeitgeist, says the following. He says, there are very high odds that the figure known as Jesus did not even exist. The reality is Jesus was a solar deity of the Gnostic sect, and like all other pagan gods, he was a mythical figure. It was the political establishment that sought to historize the Jesus figure for social control. By 325 AD in Rome, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea. It was during this meeting that the politically motivated Christian doctrines were established, and thus began a long history of Christian bloodshed and spiritual fraud. Now, for me, this passage really is almost in a nutshell what's wrong about Zeitgeist.
Right.
In a certain way, if you squint your eyes, tilt your head a little bit, that kind of matches the picture. In other words, of course, there was a lot of mythology that went into the story about Jesus. Not all of this is what the historical Jesus actually did.
If there was one.
Some people do raise legitimate doubts as to whether or not such a person ever existed. I happen to believe there's good evidence to think he did, but there's good criticisms of that.
I'm not compelled either way. I think it's entirely possible that there wasn't, and it's possible that there was, and frankly, we'll never know.
And some scholars say that, like Robert Price.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about the stained glass curtain where it's so, if there is a truth, it's so veiled that we'll never know.
But Joseph has taken this so far out of context as to give a very different impression from what the true situation really is. First of all, he says Jesus was the solar deity of the Gnostic Christian sect. It almost sounds like he's saying no Christianity existed other than Gnostic Christianity before the Council of Nicaea.
Right.
And this is ludicrous. Mm-hmm. You had Jewish Christian adoptionists who believed Jesus was essentially a man, just a man. You had the Marcionites who believed he was a god and not a man. You had the Proto-Orthodox who believed something like modern Christians do too, that he was divine and a man at the same time. And you had these Gnostics, you had these mystery cults around the time. They all had different views of Jesus. It wasn't as if only at this time people started thinking he was a historical figure and not a mythical figure.
Right.
So he oversimplifies that. And the idea that Constantine did this for political control, again, there's a little bit of truth to that. Of course, the Christianizing of the Roman Empire, certain aspects of that were calculated for political gain. I'm not going to doubt that that's true. But is there good reason to doubt that Constantine wasn't legitimately converted? And when they had the Council of Nicaea, it was to try to consolidate doctrines. Constantine did not make Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. He issued the Edict of Toleration, which ended the official persecution of Christians. It's Constantine's successor, Emperor Theodosius, in 391, declares Christianity to be the official religion. But that doesn't mean that decades earlier, during the Council of Nicaea, that this was already hatching as a political plot to take over the Roman civilization. He gives you a little bit of information and then a whole lot of speculation. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be the pattern that he follows throughout the entire movie.
Except when he just outright makes stuff up.
Well, yeah, and that certainly seemed to be the case, too. Like all these mythical parallels with other gods.
Right. And this is the stuff that gets my hackles up. Because I teach mythology, and I rather enjoy it. In the film, Joseph makes the claim that the Egyptian god Horus, falcon-headed god of the sky, he says that Horus was